But welcome, Gus. Yeah, we already had a nice little catch up. Thanks for your time. For
Yeah,
people who
it's
don't
great to
know,
be here.
yeah, thanks. I love your background as well. And you just explained the little thing you're wearing, right? It indicates how long you've been working with Alaska.
Yeah, so at Alaska, when you hit 6 months, you get a metal pair of wings. When you hit 3 years, you get these rolled rose gold wings. And then hopefully in September, I'll be getting my gold wings for 5 years. It helps honor the progression of your career throughout the company. It's nice.
That's amazing. Really, really, really proud for you. Just to give some background for everyone, I know that you've been with Alaska Airlines for almost 5 years now, that you're an engineer and that you're very hands-on. So you really work on practical solutions for operational efficiency to improve the passenger experience. That is also something you're passionate about, right? And throughout your entire career, that's something you've been working on, making sure customers get the most value out of engineering solutions. Is that sort of correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in some form of another, my whole career has been around aviation in some form or another. This is my first airline job. But yeah, I mean, my goal joining this company was to just try to help to make the whole flying thing better for people. And part of my role at Alaska is I lead the innovation practice from the engineering standpoint, which really means, how do we look 2 to 5 years in the future, and evaluate what capabilities we can expect out of the technologies of tomorrow and test them in the environment of today and help us de-risk these ideas before we prioritize them and do a stronger investment in them. So it's a very creative and open-ended role, but it's one that's grounded in a lot of our operational issues that we have, not just today, but for the future.
I know that in aviation, especially, there's so many challenges to be working on. So I'm sure that you're always busy. I've also learned that you like to work with consumer grade tech, with smart technology, so sort of technology that's readily available to make innovation as easily as possible. That's correct, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we really aim to make a rapid prototyping environment for Alaska to make it easy for teams to come in with the goal, for instance, of reducing the aircraft turnaround time by 5 minutes. And we try to create a sandbox and safe environment for us to experiment with different theories on how that might happen before we actually go to the real operation and potentially disrupt a real flight. Like I said, going on the theme of de-risking ideas, consumer grade hardware is fantastic because it allows us to take things that are as simple as a light bulb and programmatically turn them on when someone walks past a door frame, or maybe play a sound or change a light, and all these things are off the shelf consumer grade hardware that we can drop in and really combine to make a larger test fixture inexpensively, rapidly. And it allows us to then tell this very realistic story to our potential vendor partners, our commercial partners, saying, hey, it's not just that we want to reduce the turn time by 5 minutes in that example, but here's how we've actually tried to approach it in our sandbox environment. Is there a product that we can help commercialize and scale up and design specifically for our operation, because we already have some learnings on how we can improve that reality?
I think you've used some keywords there for people that the attendees might be very interested in, such as cost efficient, rapidly, improvements to the operational efficiency. Before we dive into that, you've been with Alaska Airlines for about 5 years now. I told you we could structure this webinar talking about the past, present, and the future. So let's dive in with the past. What have you sort of learned in these 5 years with Alaska Airlines up till now? How did you get started? Can you give us some background?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I joined Alaska Airlines about 6 months before the COVID pandemic happened. So I got a nice little taste of normal. This was right after our merger with Virgin America had really concluded, and we were operating as one airline. So at this point, we were figuring out what it meant to have a mixed fleet of Airbus and Boeing aircraft. It was us trying to figure out how to strengthen our position in the Pacific Northwest, specifically in Seattle and Portland. And then, of course, COVID happened. And at the time, my real focus was selling airplane seats and getting people to purchase more ancillaries and upgrade or increase the yield per ticket that we had by moving people from our basic economy product to our economy product and upwards. So it was really amazing seeing how consumer spending patterns were changing, and of course how our global route network with all of our airline partners was adjusting too, as different countries had different immigration requirements due to COVID. Throughout throughout the entire pandemic, Alaska was really joining the One World Alliance. And I took a lead role in some aspects of that integration. And it was really interesting because, here we were a primarily North American carrier with some code share outside, trying to rapidly expand to have all these partner carriers around the world and provide a world-class guest experience as well. And one of the biggest challenges that we had was, how do we position ourselves to be a global booking carrier when most of our passengers typically only book us domestic? And that's where we've seen a lot of innovation happen. And it's everything from discoverability of these international destinations to really making sure that the connection experience in the airports is seamless. So we've seen a lot of work in that regard. Following those projects, I was focusing on some more, experimental technologies. So, for instance, the electronic bag tag was one of the projects that I was really focusing on, which allows us to move the checking of bags away from the kiosk and away from these lines at the airport to the home 24 hours in advance, where you're just tapping your cell phone against that device and it updates the barcode, it updates the routing information, and so on and so forth. That way, when you show up to the airport, you just drop your bag off at a self bag drop and walk away. It's a less than 30-second transaction with those devices. So that really started turning my career less about software engineering and more into this intersection of, operations, hardware, and software. So yeah,
it's really interesting. I'd love to talk a bit more about the actual projects you're working on and how you make that passenger experience happening. Before we dive into that, is there anything, because you come from an outsider perspective, you've been with other companies, you've been with Alaska Airlines for 5 years, which is a long time, but also I've seen that in the aviation industry, there's people with 20, 30 years of experience. So
I'm still new.
You still have that fresh outlook. Is there anything that really surprised you about the industry when you started here? Talking about innovation, talking about aviation, just anything that you noted?
Yeah, so I think, most of us that come from the outside of the airline industry, we always come in as these hot shots that have these ideas on how we can do sweeping changes to improve things at the airlines. But the surprising thing as an outsider is truly how regulated a lot of these environments are. In Europe, in other countries, a lot of the time the governments are funding the airports, and they're the same entities that are funding the airlines. So everyone's kind of more aligned to these goals within their own countries. In the US, every airport effectively operates as its own regulatory body that's regulated by 5 other regulatory bodies. So there's a lot more safety risk analysis. There's a lot more discussions and collaboration and planning that has to happen. And to roll something out across all 100 plus of our airports and our network is a really wide undertaking. It's a really involved process, and there's a lot of surprises that come with that. For us, like finding the most simple and effective solution that scales across all these different platforms, all these different locations, is one of the most complicated parts of this job. And then, of course, also training a workforce of over 25,000 frontline agents on a new system is also something that takes a lot of care and planning to do effectively.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just thinking about Julia Settle's webinar, the first webinar we did back in January. She actually noted the same thing, how airlines and airports cooperate or work together is not the same in every region or in every country. And yeah, you do have to know the intricacies of that to make innovation happen. So absolutely. So many stakeholders having to work together, right? Both within airlines as outside of airlines. So yeah, lots to be excited about. Like I said, you were mentioning some projects you worked on, some projects you're working on now. Before we dive into that more, can you just explain how you see innovation or how to build an innovation practice, what innovation means to you?
Innovation is one of those words that means something different to everyone. And that was one of the first steps that we took in building our innovation practice. It's how do we begin speaking the same innovation vernacular? And, for us, what that means is we're looking for new business models, new technology capabilities, and new customer and employee experiences. And if we're able to find an intersection of the 3 of those, where, we're not just implementing technology for technology's sake, we're not just changing a business model just to change the business model, and we have a favorable guest or employee experience, when all 3 of those boxes are checked, that's what we consider a successful innovative practice. So when you define it that way, it really allows you to focus specifically on things that can be taken from an idea to a prototype to a pilot and then to a scaled product across our system. So we subscribe to the technology readiness level scale. That's something that's very commonly used in US defense companies. So if you're not familiar, a TRL 1 would be just an idea, a concept, and then a TRL 9 would be a finished product that would be ready for productionalization. It's deployed in the field, it's stable. What we really look for in our innovation practice is things in the TRL 6 to TRL 8 level. So it's technologies that are at a point where we can build a proof of concept around and prove the capability works in our environment, go to the actual operation after we de-risk it, test it at a real gate, on a real flight, on the real ramp, whatever it may be, and then recommend a pathway forward for us to actually commercialize that product in our operation in partnership with our product teams internally.
Yeah, it's really amazing. It's actually what we're doing right now as well with Bob, with our Bluetooth tracking solution, exactly as you said, building POCs and testing it, reiterating, and then taking it into the market. It's really exciting to be able to do that hand in hand with the airlines, with the passengers, with the airports, and getting that direct feedback. I have to say it was new for me, coming from other industries where solutions get implemented when they're completely ready. But here you're working with such a complex field that you have to test it in real life, right?
Absolutely. And that's part of why we're doing what we're doing. I mean, I think one of the pitfalls that a lot of our industry colleagues, and we also are guilty of this, is sometimes we expect vendors to have a fully ready product off the shelf, first attempt. Otherwise we may not evaluate it as closely. And in my opinion, I think we need to be more open as an industry to solutions that are almost there and really help and get involved early on in the product development process. And that's why we're using this consumer grade hardware, right? If we're trying to, for instance, re-envision the airport gate, we don't want to do that with existing technology. We want to find a really basic test fixture with generic, in this case, consumer grade hardware to simulate an experience demonstrator, to simulate a technology demonstrator. And that way we can partner with our vendors to actually build truly what we need for solving our problem or hitting our metrics. So starting in this more abstract, generic space allows us to then work with a company outside of Alaska to build a very specific solution for just us. And it's something that we can do with much more confidence because we've tested it in our sandbox. It's not just a theory.
So talking about sandbox, Gus, I think a lot of people here are here to learn a bit what you guys are working on now, how you put the idea of smart tech into practice. You've mentioned it a bit at the beginning of the webinar, how you're working on a baggage handling solution. Can you dive a bit more into that? Tell us what project you're excited about now.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been looking at a lot is computer vision at our gates. And there's a lot of companies out there that are starting to tackle this issue. But for us, we operate 737s, and we really don't want to over solicit gate checked bags. So what that really means is if you've ever been to a flight where it's been mostly full and they say over the intercom, hey, we need 30 something volunteers to check their bag at the gate. We want to make sure that if we're asking for bags to come off the aircraft, we want to make sure that it's because we needed them to. And we don't want a guest to check their bag and then get on board and see that there was plenty of space for their bag to be stowed anyway. So for us, we try to partner with vendors, with universities, with specialists to develop a generic pilot, in this case, a computer vision camera that counts baggage. And that allows us to then count how many bags are actually boarding the aircraft. And not only does that give us an accurate measure on how many bags we can fit in the remaining groups, but in theory, it would also provide us with a data point for every single flight in reality for us to refine our model and do this balance of being proactive with asking for baggage in advance versus cutting off at a certain point and having a negative guest experience. So that's really what we're looking at testing this quarter, is the effectiveness of computer vision at reducing the overhead carry-on issue.
Yeah, what I always like is that if there's a benefit in innovation in aviation, it's never just for one group. Like, this is obviously for the passenger a big help, but I can imagine that it will also increase crew satisfaction as they don't have to deal with angry passengers, with upset passengers. They have to let go of their bags. Again, I'm going to guess that also the turnaround time might be better because you get your passengers on board quicker. They find space for their luggage quicker. So amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, it also has implications for the fuel program, right? Because there's less commodities in the hold that we have to plan for fuel on the manifest for. There's other applications of this technology, for instance, in the airport lobbies. So, that can help us do queue management and tell you exactly what the quickest line is to get done what you need to get done through the app. And, in theory, it could also help us send agents directly to a guest that's having an issue. If we can detect someone that's frustrated, or, maybe someone with an oversized bag that's in the normal size line, we can proactively go to those guests in theory and help give them that direct service that we're known for at Alaska Airlines.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, it seems like Alaska is very, very high on innovation. You said, okay, we're a local carrier. We had to grow bigger. You guys have managed to do so. So you're constantly reinventing yourself, being a big player in a very competitive landscape. I'm sure that there is attendees here who also have innovative ideas, but who have more problems pushing those forwards within the company. Would you have any tips for them on how to push innovation forward, on how to get everyone on board, or how does it happen at Alaska? Why is there such a culture of transformation of digital innovation?
Yeah, so innovation is honestly part of our DNA. We were the first airline to ever sell tickets online. Even 2 years before Amazon existed, we were the first airline to have self-check-in kiosks. So it's always been part of our competitive strategy to have these new emerging guest experiences that are not just helpful for the guest, but also to our employees. That being said, when we pick up a new incubator project, we always start with finding executive sponsors. We staff the incubator with an advisory group of subject matter experts, of business area owners internally. And from day zero, we're involving all of the people that own these areas that this incubator project touches. So there's never an instance where we're developing something in total isolation away from the people that are responsible for it. It's a partnership. It's this hand-in-hand walk through defining the problem, defining the opportunity, defining and agreeing upon the metrics for success. Another thing is sometimes we actually are expecting to fail, right? We're expecting to hit the boundaries of technology, and that's okay, right? That's where we provide a recommendation saying, hey, for XYZ idea, in theory, it's possible, but it's not scalable because maybe the current battery life for this technology is too low, or maybe it's because we don't have the means of installing this kind of hardware in all of our stations, right? And that at least proves that we've evaluated the idea, we know where the technology is, and it allows us to plan for revisiting it in the future once we hit certain indicators that the technology out in the world has evolved to a point where we can then re-platform and retest. Electronic bag tag is a great example of that. We did a 500 guest trial in 2015. The technology wasn't ready. We waited 7 years, and we partnered with the bag tag company to do another trial for it. And it turns out that the technology was ready, and we scaled up the program from there. So, for us, like I said, going back to the theme of de-risking ideas, we're here to really just honestly give a report to our business on what the real capability and readiness level is for a certain technology to a specific application within our operation.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to remember that preparation is really, really important. So you have to define innovation first within your company, and then also make sure that all stakeholders, all partners are on board, and that there's clear metrics. That's actually what we're also doing for our POCs now. We're setting the metrics, we're setting up the surveys to check if the crew is satisfied, the passengers are satisfied. Yeah, absolutely, very important. I've put a little poll online for everyone listening on our LinkedIn page. You can find a poll talking about the future of innovation. So you can leave your vote there, what you think will be the next step in digital transformation for aviation. So just leave your vote there. We can have a look at it after the LinkedIn Live, learn from your insights. Of course, we strongly believe in baggage handling solutions, you as well. Gus, I actually wrote a blog post about it today, about being a chief baggage officer, which is a role you don't really see yet at airlines, but I feel what you do could actually fill in that role, someone who thinks about the baggage solution.
It's a really significant area of focus, specifically for us, but for everyone in the industry. And it's one of those problems where, I mean, I've been focusing on baggage for just 3.5 years now. I work with many people that have significantly more years than me in this space, but I'm always learning something new every day about this space. There's always something surprising, and it's an evolving system,
Yeah.
which, frankly, is why, and I keep referring to this as an innovation practice. It's an innovation practice because the model and the process that we follow is constantly improving. An innovation process of yesterday may not apply to the airline of tomorrow based on our business requirements. So every time we run one of these incubator programs, we're always doing a retrospective and figuring out how we can perform better. How can we, tighten up the timeline, the communication, and ultimately make this a smoother process. So we're always continually improving this. And for every project, it looks just a little different. The flexibility is key, depending on the teams that you're working with and their requirements.
Flexibility, really, really important, exactly. And sometimes, yeah, it can be a bit, it seems to be lacking in aviation from first sight, because there's so many systems and processes and operations. But I've learned that once you get to talk to people, they're actually really eager to innovate, and that they do have that flexibility for new ideas. So we've talked about the past, we've talked about the present. Let's finish up with the future. Anything you're particularly excited about, maybe a bit long term as well, how you see the baggage handling evolve longer term?
Yeah, I think, for us, we're even starting beyond that. I mean, what we really need to figure out is, what do our customers expect the airport experience in the United States to be in the 5 to 10 year future? And, that can really go two directions. That can either be, something that's a Singapore style social meetup place where it's a pleasure to show up to the airport hours in advance and spend your time there. Or it becomes a portal where people are showing up and ultimately just getting there to get out. And depending on what the answer to that question is really what's going to shape the future of not just baggage, but also, our lobbies, our service level, our lounge program. I mean, there's a lot of different side effects that we have to plan for based on what our customers expect. In the baggage space, though, I mean, there's a lot of really interesting things that are happening around the industry. I mean, in Europe, there's starting to be restrictions on how much weight an employee can carry per day. And that's driving a lot of focus on, robotics assistance to help minimize the amount of load and manual labor that ramp agents have to do, and the effort they exert on their bodies. But there's also a lot of focus on operational efficiency too. And so for us, one of our highest priorities is reducing how many bags we fail to load. How do we make sure that we get our bags to our baggage carousels in 20 minutes or less more consistently? And so, looking at the different ways of sorting bags, transferring bags, assigning ramp agents their next step, providing the right information about a piece of luggage, so that way we have a less chance of missing or misrouting that bag. There's a lot of awareness tools that we're starting to invest in and really implement in our business, and it's having a significantly profound effect on our mishandled baggage rates. I also am interested to see in the future what happens with not just consumer expectations of carry-on baggage, but also our airlines' expectations of carry-on baggage. Personally, I love carrying my bag on, but when everyone, 179 people on a 737, carry a bag on, that adds a lot of time to the turnaround process. So we need to figure out if there's a way to get people on faster, if there's a way for us to incentivize people to not carry on as much. Maybe it's something about guest confidence in getting their bag at the other end of their destination. There's a lot of different angles to this. Ultimately, with our innovation practice, that's our job to figure out, right? We need to figure out where the business model lies, where the customer and employee experience is, and then, of course, what technology can we implement and test to support the scaling of that program.
Yeah, absolutely. This reminds me of the webinar we had last time with Timos. I don't know if he's here, but if you are, hi Timos, he really focused on the importance of data to start improving the airlines and airport efficiency. And as you mentioned as well, it's all about getting those insights and seeing where improvements can be made and how they can be made, how you can optimize every step of that journey. And then what you said about airports, I personally believe that, especially in Europe, I already see that tendencies where airports become more like hubs where people want to hang out for a longer time, and airports really investing as well into making sure that that becomes a space where there's a lot to explore and look to discover. So
Absolutely.
Same for America. We'll see. Anyway,
Yeah.
I see that we're almost running out of time, Gus. I know a lot of people might still have some questions, so I'm just going to invite them to leave them in the chat or to reach out directly to us, and then we can put them in touch with you. But I have to thank you, Gus. This was really, really insightful, very practical. I love how many tips and tricks you gave, and I'm definitely going to remember define innovation first. Make sure that you work with partners who have a solution that doesn't have to be finished yet, but that you can work on together. And make sure that you get both internally and externally all the stakeholders in the same direction, KPIs, OKRs, all defined, ready for evaluation. Anything you'd like to add? Anything you'd like to say to your audience?
I would just say, to all my airline partners out there, be open, explore, put your problems out there and see what comes back to you. And don't just look within the airline spaces, but also look into the tech spaces and the entertainment spaces and other hospitality related spaces too. I think there's a lot of lessons we can learn from other industries, but as much of an integration practice that airline work tends to be, we actually do have an opportunity to have a significant amount of influence in the product development lifecycle. So that's my advice. Get involved early. Don't be afraid to fail. Align your stakeholders and provide a great service to them. And try to do things as inexpensively as you can. Mock things up. Build experience demonstrators. Build technology demonstrators. Do it with something as simple as a Philips Hue light from Amazon, right? These really small technologies can help show and demonstrate and test all sorts of different things. I mean, if you we have a fake gate in our lab that's just made out of wood, right? It's not fancy. It doesn't look like a gate, but it's the right size and shape of a gate. We can put motion detectors in there. And again, it's all consumer grade, but for that, we can use and build a guest per minute count through a door. And that's what allows us to then use something like speakers and say, hey, like, what if we played music in the boarding group that was a certain amount of beats per minute? Do guests board faster then? And using, again, consumer grade hardware to build and facilitate those theories and the validation of them is a really quick and efficient way to either prove out or squash an idea.
I know you've got some good examples with those Philips lights, for example. So if you want to learn more about that, just contact Gus directly. He's very excited to talk about this, I'm sure. It's a great story. Great, Gus. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Take care, and thank you for hosting, Katrine.